Sandra here. So I'm just going to talk you through the poetry of Norman MacCaig and explain why I chose it for this app. I appreciate that not everybody will be doing this in schools because all schools do different ones. But I sort of had to pick one to get started. I'm hoping to add more as time goes on. Because I think the more that I've got on the app, the more helpful it'll be to people. However, this is the first one I've chosen, the reason being a lot of schools do the poetry of Norman MacCaig. And there's some good reasons for that. First of all, he's one of our most celebrated poets. A lot of Norman MacCaig's work was exploring the idea of the land of Scotland, the geography of it, the way that human beings fit into it. He's got some really beautiful poetry. And I saw an interview with him once where he said that the minute it appeared in his head, he would just write it down, which is quite an unusual way, and not every poet will write that way. But it just shows he was really a very natural poet. He was born in 1910, so he passed away some years ago, but he was quite old when he passed away. He grew up in Edinburgh, but he also had relatives in the Highlands and Islands, and so some of his poems are writing about those memories of going to stay with those families back when he was young. MacCaig often used clear, accessible language, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's such a great poet to study at this level. It's what we call a crossover text, so some pupils will be learning this for their higher. And, MacCaig works at both levels. He explores some very complicated ideas, but he makes it so simple because his poetry is so accessible. He talks in images and sounds that allow you to really visualise what it is he's going on about. And so that's one of the things we're going to look at. The themes of his poems are nature, identity, and the human condition, showcasing a deep introspection, which means he just thought very deeply about things. There's Norman, hoping that you'll enjoy his poetry. Of course, if you write about him in an English exam, you refer to him as MacCaig. We're very rude, we just refer to people by their last name. So, the first poem that I'm going to talk about here is Aunt Julia. This is a poem about language and loss. He goes to stay with his auntie, but she only speaks Gaelic and he only speaks English. So they can't communicate together. The whole poem sort of traces that frustration and anger and the sadness when she dies before he's able to learn Gaelic. Hotel Room 12th Floor is a very different poem. He wrote it when he was travelling and he was staying in New York. But it was New York of the 1970s. It was very different to the New York we see today, which is really very modern and very encouraging to tourists. In the 1970s, New York was quite a dark and dangerous place in some bits of the city. Although I imagine there's always been lots of really lovely bits as well. MacCaig talks in this poem about his experience, and he's really exploring that even though we have all this amazing technology, human beings haven't really moved on very far. And you know what? I always think Hotel Room 12th Floor is just as valid today as it was back in the 70s when MacCaig wrote it. Basking Shark is really a very light poem in nature. It's quite a different tone to the others. In Basking Shark, he's out on the water on his boat and he accidentally bumps into a shark. Now, anybody that's seen these creatures, they are huge. They do go down the Murray coast and the northeast coast of Scotland, so people do see them off the coast from time to time, but they are very large. And MacCaig's experience leads him to think quite deeply about the nature of humans and how we treat the creatures that we share the world with. On Lackey's Croft is one of those poems that explores the idea of a Highland life. Crofting is a really challenging occupation. It's a historic one for Scotland and one that people are trying to keep alive, and so he explored this in a poem. Old Highland Women also explores our heritage. And Landscape and I is a poem about identity, connection, and what it is to be human. Now you'll be noticing that some of these poems seem to have some things in common. And that's exactly what we want you to be thinking about. Because when you go into the exam, you're going to have to talk about some of the connections between those poems and contrast and compare some of them. So what is it all for? It's part of your critical reading exam for National 5. And the exam has the poetry, and you'll also learn another text of a different genre, either prose or a play, in order to be able to write a critical essay in the second part. But for this video, we're just focusing on the first part. And there it is. That's what it looks like. Well, I mean, it's a whole page. So what I left off was the contents page, because I really just wanted you to pay attention to the fact that it's the English critical reading exam. And this is sometimes called paper 2, and that's very easy to know why. It's because it's the second exam that you'll do. You'll go and do the close reading exam first, the RUI, Reading for Understanding, Analysis and Evaluation. And then you'll go in and do the critical reading exam. The exam will have one of the poems that you've studied in it, and you'll answer questions on the poem, and then one final question comparing some of the other poems. So realistically, the best way to get really good marks is just to prepare yourself well. Just revise all of the poems because you don't know which one's going to come up. This exam is 1 hour and 30 minutes. It is a long one. It's 45 minutes for the poetry questions and 45 minutes for your critical essay. Now, if you prepare yourself and you know everything you need to know about all your poems, that 1.5 hours is going to fly by because you'll just be writing all the way through. And that's where we really want you to get to. So we're going to move on to the next section. And I hope you really enjoy looking at the first of our poems, which is going to be Hotel Room, 12th Floor.